I'm Maya, 23, and the moment my mother screamed those words at me, I thought my family was finally showing their true colors. What I didn't know was that walking out that door would lead me to discover a family secret so devastating that it would completely flip everything I thought I knew about loyalty, love, and the people who raised me. 3 months later, when I finally learned the truth, it wasn't just my relationship with my mother that changed forever, it was the entire foundation of our family that crumbled, revealing betrayals that went back decades and setting off a chain reaction of justice that none of us saw coming. Hey everyone! Before we dive into this wild family drama that'll have you questioning everything you know about blood loyalty, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. I love connecting with viewers from around the world. If you're ready for a story that proves karma really does come full circle, smash that like button and hit subscribe because trust me, you won't want to miss how this family betrayal unfolds. This isn't just another family fight. This is about discovering that sometimes the people who hurt you the most are the ones preparing to face the consequences they never saw coming. Growing up in the Mitchell household meant understanding your place in an unspoken hierarchy, and I was definitely at the bottom. My older brother Derek, 26, could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. While I worked 2 part-time jobs through college and paid for my own textbooks, Derek lived rent-free in his downtown apartment that Dad helped him buy. When Derek crashed his BMW after a night of drinking, Mom called it an unfortunate accident and helped him get a lawyer. When I got a small scratch on Mom's car from a grocery cart, I heard about it for months. The favoritism was so blatant that extended family members would make awkward jokes about it at gatherings. Maya's the responsible one, but Derek's the favorite, my aunt would whisper, thinking I couldn't hear. It stung every time, but I kept hoping that eventually, my hard work and dedication would be recognized. I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in marketing while working 25 hours a week. Derek barely scraped by with a communications degree and spent his senior year partying. After college, I moved back home temporarily to save money for my own place. I contributed to household expenses, helped with groceries, and even took over most of the cleaning since Mom claimed her arthritis was getting worse. Derek, meanwhile, would show up for Sunday dinners, charm everyone with his stories, and leave with containers of Mom's homemade food and cash to help with expenses. The dynamic became even more toxic when Derek started dating Stephanie, a real estate agent who seemed to share the family's opinion that Derek was God's gift to the world. Stephanie would make subtle digs about my still living at home situation, while Derek would laugh and say things like, "Maya's taking her time figuring things out." The irony wasn't lost on me. I had a job, savings, and actual plans, while Derek was coasting on Dad's connections and Mom's emotional support. What hurt most was how my parents dismissed my achievements. When I got promoted to senior marketing coordinator, Mom's response was, "That's nice, dear." When Derek mentioned he might get promoted to assistant manager at the family friend's company where Dad got him a job, it was celebration time. They took him out to dinner and talked about it for weeks. The financial disparity was the most glaring evidence of their favoritism. Derek's car payments, insurance, phone bill, and even his gym membership were family expenses. When I asked if they could help with my student loans, Dad said it would be good for me to build character by handling my own responsibilities. The same man who co-signed Derek's luxury apartment lease and bought him a new laptop for work told me that struggling financially would make me stronger. I started documenting everything in a journal, not out of spite, but because I was beginning to question my own perception of reality. Was I really asking for too much? Was I actually ungrateful? The gaslighting was so consistent that I wondered if maybe they were right, and I was just jealous of Derek's success. But deep down, I knew something was fundamentally wrong with how I was being treated. The breaking point had been building for months, but I never expected it to explode the way it did. Looking back, I realized that fight wasn't really about what I said or did. It was about years of resentment and favoritism finally reaching a boiling point. What I couldn't have known was that there were much bigger secrets simmering beneath the surface, secrets that would make all of this favoritism seem like a minor family quirk compared to the betrayals I was about to uncover. The night everything fell apart started innocuously enough. I was in the kitchen making dinner after another exhausting day at work when Derek waltzed in with Stephanie, both clearly having had a few drinks at some upscale restaurant. They were loud and giggly, completely ignoring the fact that I was obviously tired and trying to prepare a quiet meal. Maya, Derek announced dramatically, guess what? Stephanie and I are looking at houses tomorrow. Dad's going to help us with the down payment. He said it with such casual entitlement, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. Stephanie beamed beside him, already planning their dream kitchen renovation. Something snapped inside me. Maybe it was the exhaustion from pulling double shifts, maybe it was the student loan payment that had left my account practically empty, or maybe it was just years of watching Derek get handed everything while I scraped for every opportunity. That's great, I said, my voice tight with controlled anger. I'm sure it's nice to have parents who actually invest in your future. The kitchen went silent. Derek's smile faltered, and Stephanie looked uncomfortable for the first time since I'd met her. But I wasn't done. Years of swallowed words came pouring out. Do you know what it's like to watch your brother get everything handed to him while you work your ass off for scraps of recognition? Do you know what it's like to be treated like a burden in your own family? My voice was rising, but I didn't care anymore. I've been contributing to this household financially and practically since I moved back, and you both act like I'm some kind of freeloader while Golden Boy Derek gets a house down payment. Derek's face darkened. Jesus, Maya. What's your problem? Can you just be happy for me for once? You're always so bitter about everything. His dismissive tone was the match that lit the fuse. Bitter? I'm bitter because I've spent my entire life being the responsible one while you get rewarded for mediocrity. I'm bitter because I have to hear about your apartment, your car, your job that Dad got you, your everything, while I'm told that struggling builds character. That's when Mom appeared, apparently having overheard from the living room. Her face was flushed with anger, and I could see Dad lurking behind her, looking uncomfortable but not stepping in to defuse the situation as usual. How dare you speak to your brother that way? Mom's voice was shaking with rage. After everything we've done for you, after giving you a roof over your head, this is how you show gratitude? You're nothing but jealous and spiteful. What have you done for me, Mom? Really, what have you done? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've done everything for Derek and treated me like an inconvenience. The words felt dangerous leaving my mouth, but I was past caring about consequences. Mom's eyes flashed with something I'd never seen before, pure fury mixed with something else I couldn't identify. You ungrateful little bitch. We didn't have to let you move back in. We didn't have to put up with your attitude and your constant complaining. If you hate it here so much, if we're such terrible parents, then get out. Get out and never come back. The kitchen erupted in chaos. Stephanie grabbed Derek's arm, pulling him back as if I might physically attack them. Dad was saying something about everyone calming down, but his voice sounded distant and weak. And Mom was standing there breathing heavily, looking at me with such contempt that it physically hurt. Fine, I said, my voice eerily calm now that the explosion had happened. I'll pack my things and be gone tonight. But don't expect me to come crawling back when you realize what you've lost. Derek snorted. What we've lost? Maya, you contribute nothing but drama to this family. We'll be better off without your constant negativity. Those words hit harder than Mom screaming. This wasn't just about favoritism anymore. They genuinely saw me as a problem to be solved, a burden to be eliminated. As I walked upstairs to pack, I could hear them downstairs, probably comforting Derek and Stephanie, probably already talking about how much more peaceful the house would be without me. It took me less than 2 hours to pack everything that mattered. I had saved enough money for a security deposit and first month's rent, so I wasn't completely helpless, but the emotional devastation was overwhelming. As I loaded my car, none of them came outside. No one tried to stop me or apologize or even say goodbye. Driving away from the house where I grew up, I felt a strange mixture of liberation and heartbreak. I was free from the constant comparisons and emotional manipulation, but I was also alone in a way I'd never been before. What I didn't know was that leaving would set in motion a series of discoveries that would make this fight seem like a minor disagreement compared to the family secrets I was about to uncover. The first month of independence was harder than I'd expected, but not in the ways I thought it would be. Financially, I was managing better than anticipated. Turns out, when you're not constantly guilt into contributing to family expenses while watching your brother get handouts, your money stretches further. Emotionally, though, the silence was deafening. I found a decent one-bedroom apartment in a complex about 20 minutes from work. It wasn't luxurious, but it was mine. For the first time in my adult life, I could make decisions without considering how they'd affect family dynamics or whether they'd trigger another comparison to Derek. I could eat dinner at 9 p.m. if I wanted, leave dishes in the sink overnight, and watch TV without someone making passive-aggressive comments about my choices. Work became my sanctuary. My boss, Jennifer, had noticed my improved focus and energy levels immediately. "Whatever's different about your home situation, it's working for you," she said during a project meeting. "Your creativity and productivity have gone through the roof." She was right. Without the constant emotional drain of family drama, I was excelling in ways I hadn't thought possible. I threw myself into a major campaign for a local restaurant chain, working late nights and weekends not because I had to, but because I wanted to. The campaign was a massive success, bringing in more new customers than they'd seen in 5 years. Jennifer hinted that a promotion might be coming, along with a significant salary increase. Meanwhile, the silence from my family was complete. No phone calls, no texts, no acknowledgement that I even existed. At first, I checked my phone obsessively, expecting someone to reach out, but as weeks passed, the lack of contact confirmed what I'd suspected all along. They were genuinely better off without me, or at least they thought they were. I started building new relationships and strengthening old ones that had been neglected due to family obligations. Sarah, a college friend who'd always said my family dynamic seemed unhealthy, became a close confidant. "I never wanted to overstep," she admitted over coffee, "but watching how they treated you is painful. You're thriving now." The changes weren't just professional and social, they were physical too. The constant stress of walking on eggshells had been taking a toll I hadn't realized. My sleep improved, my appetite normalized, and people started commenting that I looked happier and more relaxed. I was rediscovering parts of my personality that had been suppressed for years. But the most unexpected development was romantic. James, a graphic designer who worked with our marketing team, had apparently been interested in me for months, but felt I was too stressed and unavailable to approach. "You seemed like you were carrying the weight of the world," he explained on our first date. "Now you're like a completely different person, confident, funny, relaxed." James was everything my family would have disapproved of. He was an artist, he had tattoos, he drove an older motorcycle instead of a new car, and he'd never had a traditional corporate job. But he was also kind, thoughtful, creative, and genuinely interested in my thoughts and feelings. Being with him felt like discovering what relationships were supposed to be like. As my second month of independence began, I realized I hadn't just left my family's house, I'd left their toxic mindset behind too. I stopped second-guessing every decision, stopped apologizing for taking up space, stopped minimizing my accomplishments to make others feel better. The Maya who had lived in that house seemed like a different person entirely. Friends who had known me for years started commenting on the transformation. "You're like yourself again," my college roommate said during a video call. "I didn't realize how much you'd changed until I saw you change back." Her words hit me hard. I hadn't just been unhappy at home, I'd been a diminished version of myself. The promotion Jennifer had hinted at became official, along with a $15,000 salary increase and my own small team to manage. I was younger than most senior marketing managers, but my results spoke for themselves. The irony wasn't lost on me. While Derek was still coasting in his nepotism job, I was building a career based purely on merit. But success couldn't completely fill the void left by losing my family. I missed the idea of them more than the reality, if that makes sense. I missed having people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, even though their love had always felt very conditional indeed. Late at night, I would sometimes wonder if I'd been too harsh, if I should have tried harder to make things work. Those doubts would disappear by morning, though. In the clear light of day, I could see that leaving had been the healthiest decision I'd ever made. I was building something real and sustainable, based on my own efforts and genuine relationships. Whatever happened with my family in the future, I was no longer dependent on their approval or support. What I didn't know was that while I was building this new life, old secrets were starting to surface back home, and the family I'd left behind was about to face consequences for choices made long before I was even born. It was a rainy Thursday evening in November, exactly 3 months and 2 weeks after I'd left home, when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer. Telemarketers had been particularly persistent lately. But something made me pick up on the fourth ring. Is this Maya Mitchell? The voice was elderly, female, and unfamiliar. Yes, who's asking? My name is Eleanor Hartwell. I was your grandmother's best friend for over 40 years. I think we need to talk. My grandmother had died when I was 12, and I barely remembered her having friends outside the family. Mom had always been very controlling about who we had contact with, claiming that most people were just interested in drama or gossip. I'm sorry, but I don't think I know you. No, dear, you wouldn't. Your mother made sure of that. There was a bitterness in her voice that made me sit up straighter. But your grandmother spoke about you constantly in her final years. She was very worried about you, and frankly, so was I. When I heard about what happened between you and your mother, I decided it was time someone told you the truth. My heart started racing. What truth? What are you talking about? Not over the phone, dear. Can you meet me for coffee tomorrow? I live about an hour from where you work now. Yes, I've been keeping track. Your grandmother asked me to, in case you ever needed someone who knew the real story. I agreed to meet her at a small cafe in her town, my mind spinning with questions. What real story? What had my grandmother been worried about? Why had Eleanor been keeping track of me? That night was sleepless. James tried to comfort me, but I was too anxious to be soothed. I kept thinking about my grandmother, trying to remember conversations we'd had, looking for clues I might have missed. She'd always seemed sad when she looked at me, but I'd assumed it was just because she was elderly and nostalgic. The next day dragged endlessly. I told Jennifer I had a family emergency and left work early, driving through autumn countryside to a small town I'd never visited. The cafe Eleanor had chosen was exactly the kind of place my mother would have hated, cozy, cluttered, full of mismatched furniture and local art. Eleanor was easy to spot. She was probably in her 70s, with silver hair and sharp blue eyes that reminded me uncomfortably of my grandmother. She stood when she saw me, and I was surprised when she pulled me into a warm hug. You look just like her, she said, stepping back to study my face. Same stubborn chin, same intelligent eyes. She would be so proud of how you've turned out. We settled into a corner booth with coffee and homemade pie. Eleanor didn't waste time with small talk. Your grandmother never forgave herself for what she allowed to happen to you, she began. She tried to intervene multiple times, but your mother was very good at manipulation, even back then. I don't understand. What did she allow to happen? Eleanor sighed deeply. Maya, dear, there's no easy way to say this. Derek isn't your brother. He's your cousin. Your mother's sister died in a car accident when Derek was 2 years old, and your parents adopted him. But they never told either of you the truth. The cafe seemed to spin around me. That's impossible. Derek is 3 years older than me. If he was adopted when he was 2, I would have been born already. No, sweetheart. Derek is actually 6 months younger than you, not 3 years older. Your mother lied about his age to make the story work. She even had false documents created. I felt like I was going to be sick. But his birthday, we celebrated his birthday every year. On a made-up date. Your grandmother kept all the real documents, birth certificates, adoption papers, everything. She was planning to tell you when you turned 18, but your mother threatened to cut off all contact if she did. Your grandmother chose to stay in your life rather than tell you the truth, and she regretted that decision for the rest of her life. The implications were staggering. Derek wasn't just the favorite child. He was a child who wasn't even really their child, but he was treated better than their actual daughter. Why would they lie about something like this? Eleanor's expression grew darker. Because your mother was already pregnant with you when Derek came to live with them, and she resented having to take him in. But your father's family has money, old money, and Derek's mother was your father's favorite sister. The family expected Derek to be treated as an heir, not an adopted child. So your mother created this elaborate lie to explain why Derek deserved special treatment. But that doesn't make sense. If Derek was adopted, why would he get special treatment over their biological child? Because, dear girl, your mother never wanted children at all. You were an accident, and Derek was an obligation. But Derek came with expectations from your father's wealthy family, and your mother saw an opportunity. If she could make Derek the golden child, the heir apparent, she could secure her place in the family fortune. My hands were shaking as I reached for my coffee. You're telling me that my mother treated her biological daughter like garbage in favor of an adopted nephew because she thought it would make her richer. I'm telling you that your mother is a calculating woman who saw Derek as an investment and saw you as an inconvenience. Your grandmother had documents proving all of this, including evidence that your mother has been receiving money from your father's family specifically for Derek's care, money that was supposed to go toward his education and future, not luxury apartments and cars. Eleanor reached into her purse and pulled out a manila envelope. Your grandmother left this for you. She made me promise to give it to you if anything ever happened that made you question your place in that family. From what I've heard, that day has come. Inside the envelope were documents that confirmed everything Eleanor had told me and more. Birth certificates showing Derek was actually younger than me. Adoption papers. Bank statements showing payments from my father's family. And letters. Dozens of letters from my grandmother to Eleanor, detailing her concerns about how I was being treated and her growing suspicions about my mother's motivations. This transformation moment hit me like a physical blow, changing everything I thought I knew about my family. Suddenly, all the favoritism, all the dismissal, all the cruelty made horrible sense. I wasn't the ungrateful daughter who couldn't appreciate her family's love. I was the biological child being sacrificed for financial and social gain. But as devastating as these revelations were, they also filled me with a rage I'd never experienced before. My mother hadn't just been playing favorites, she'd been running a decades-long con game, using me as a pawn while elevating Derek to secure her own future. And my father, weak as always, had been complicit in every bit of it. As I sat in that cafe, holding proof of the most elaborate betrayal I could imagine, I realized that walking away from my family hadn't been enough. They had stolen my childhood, my self-worth, and my relationship with my grandmother. They had built their entire lives on lies and manipulation. And now, finally, I had the power to tear it all down. The question wasn't whether I would use this information. It was how completely I would destroy the life they'd built on my sacrifice. Because if there's one thing I'd learned in 3 months of independence, it was that I was much stronger and more capable than they'd ever allowed me to believe. The game was about to change, and for the first time in my life, I held all the cards. Driving home from my meeting with Eleanor, my mind was reeling with the implications of what I'd learned. But beneath the shock and hurt, a cold, calculating anger was taking shape. I wasn't just going to confront my parents with this information, I was going to make sure there were real consequences for what they'd done. The first thing I did was secure the documents Eleanor had given me. I made multiple copies, stored them in different locations, and scanned everything to secure cloud storage. If my mother was capable of creating false documents for Derek, she was certainly capable of trying to destroy evidence of her lies. Next, I started researching. If my father's family had been sending money specifically for Derek's care and education, and that money had been misused, there might be legal consequences. I spent my weekend diving deep into fraud statutes, adoption laws, and financial misrepresentation. What I found was encouraging. Misrepresenting the use of funds designated for a specific person's care could constitute fraud, especially when those funds came from family trusts or estates. I also began reaching out to other family members I'd lost touch with over the years. My mother had always been very good at controlling family narratives and limiting contact with relatives who might ask uncomfortable questions. But now I had questions of my own, and I suspected some of those relatives might have answers. My first call was to my father's brother, Uncle Richard, who lived across the country. Richard had always seemed uncomfortable during family gatherings, often making comments about Derek that I hadn't understood at the time. Now I wondered if he'd known the truth all along. Maya. Richard sounded genuinely pleased to hear from me. It's been far too long. How are you doing? I decided to be direct. Uncle Richard, I need to ask you something important, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Did you know that Derek was adopted? The silence on the other end was answer enough. Jesus Christ, Maya. How did you find out? That's not important right now. What's important is what else you know. Has your family been sending money for Derek's care? Richard sighed heavily. Maya, this is complicated. Yes, there's been money from Dad's estate. Derek's mother was Dad's favorite, and when she died, he set aside funds specifically for Derek's future. But your mother told us Derek was struggling, that he needed help with basic expenses, education, getting on his feet. Uncle Richard, Derek lives in a luxury apartment that my father co-signed for. He drives a BMW. He's never struggled for anything in his entire life. What? Richard's voice sharp now. That can't be right. Your mother sends us updates about Derek's struggles, his student loans, his difficulty finding stable work. We've been sending $2,000 a month for the past 5 years. My blood ran cold. $2,000 a month for 5 years was $120,000. Combined with all the other support Derek had received from my parents, he'd been living like royalty while I worked multiple jobs and took out student loans. Uncle Richard, I need you to document everything. Every payment, every communication with my mother about Derek's needs. I think Derek and my parents have been defrauding your family. Maya, these are serious accusations. Are you absolutely certain about what you're saying? I told him everything Eleanor had revealed, and by the end of the conversation, Richard was furious. Your grandmother tried to tell us something was wrong years ago, but your mother convinced us she was just getting old and confused. Oh God, Maya, what has Helen done? Richard promised to gather all the financial records and communications with my mother. He also revealed something that made my stomach drop. There were other relatives who had been contributing to Derek's support fund over the years. My mother had apparently been telling everyone different versions of Derek's struggles while he lived like a prince. My next call was to my father's sister, Aunt Patricia, who lived in the same state but had always been kept at arm's length by my mother. Patricia's reaction was immediate and explosive. I knew something was wrong, she said after I explained the situation. Maya, your mother called me 3 years ago asking for help with Derek's medical expenses. She said he'd been in an accident and needed surgery. I sent $5,000. But when I asked to visit Derek in the hospital, she said he was too embarrassed about his condition to see family. The web of lies was even more extensive than I'd imagined. My mother hadn't just been playing favorites, she'd been running elaborate cons on multiple family members, using Derek as a sympathy case while he lived in luxury. But the most damaging information came from an unexpected source. James, who worked in graphic design, had connections in the advertising world, including people who worked in background check and investigation services. When I told him what I'd discovered, he offered to help me dig deeper. If your mother has been falsifying documents and misrepresenting Derek's situation for years, there might be a trail, he said. Let me ask around. I know someone who specializes in document analysis and fraud investigation. James's contact, Maria Santos, was a forensic accountant who worked with lawyers on fraud cases. When I showed her the documents Eleanor had given me, along with the information I'd gathered from relatives, her expression grew increasingly grim. This is extensive, she said, spreading bank statements across her desk. If what you're telling me is accurate, your mother has been operating what amounts to a long-term confidence scheme. She's taken money from multiple sources under false pretenses, created false documents, and potentially committed identity fraud by misrepresenting Derek's age and circumstances. Maria offered to do a preliminary investigation pro bono, partly because she was intrigued by the case, and partly because she was outraged by what my mother had done. Within a week, she'd uncovered a paper trail that was even more damning than we'd expected. The financial fraud was just the beginning. My mother had been filing Derek as a dependent on tax returns, claiming educational credits for college expenses that had actually been paid by family members, and even claiming him as disabled on certain applications to qualify for additional benefits. Meanwhile, Derek had been working and earning his own income, much of which went unreported. But the most shocking discovery was that my mother had been intercepting mail intended for me from my grandmother. Eleanor's letters mentioned that my grandmother had tried to send me birthday cards, Christmas gifts, and even college care packages, but I'd never received them. My mother had been stealing mail from her own daughter to maintain control over family relationships. As the evidence mounted, I realized this wasn't just about getting revenge or exposing family lies. This was about actual crimes that had been committed against multiple people over many years. My mother hadn't just been emotionally abusive, she'd been a criminal, and it was time for her to face the consequences. The question now was how to present this information in a way that would have maximum impact. I wasn't just looking for an apology or acknowledgement. I wanted justice, both for myself and for all the family members who had been defrauded. I wanted Derek to understand that his entire life had been built on lies and theft. And I wanted my father to confront the fact that he'd been complicit in destroying his own daughter to enable his wife's criminal behavior. With Maria's help, I developed a plan that would expose everything in the most devastating way possible. We would present all the evidence at once, in front of multiple witnesses, making it impossible for my mother to lie her way out of the situation or manipulate the narrative later. The perfect opportunity came when Uncle Richard called to tell me about a family reunion being planned for the holidays, the first one in years. Apparently, several relatives had been discussing the Derek situation after our conversations, and they wanted answers directly from my parents. My mother, confident in her ability to control family narratives, had enthusiastically agreed to host the gathering. She thinks she's going to convince everyone that you're just a bitter daughter making up stories, Richard told me. She has no idea what's coming. I initially wasn't invited to the reunion, which was perfect for my plan. Instead, I coordinated with the relatives who now knew the truth. We would arrive together, unannounced, with all the evidence organized and ready to present. Maria had prepared a comprehensive folder for each family member present, containing copies of all the fraudulent documents, bank statements, and communications. She'd even created a timeline showing how the lies had evolved over the years and how much money had been taken under false pretenses. The week before the confrontation, I made one final preparation. I reached out to Derek directly. He'd blocked me on social media after our fight, but I managed to get a message to him through a mutual acquaintance from high school. Derek, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I've discovered some things about our family that you need to know before the reunion next week. Things about your adoption, your real age, and where the money for your lifestyle has been coming from. If you have any integrity at all, you'll want to hear this before everyone else does. Derek's response was exactly what I expected, dismissive and arrogant. Maya, I don't know what kind of desperate attention-seeking scheme this is, but I'm not interested in your drama. Whatever lies you've made up to try to get back into the family, it's not going to work. Perfect. His overconfidence would make the reveal even more satisfying. The reunion was scheduled for Saturday afternoon. I spent Friday night with James, going over the plan one final time. I was nervous. Not about the confrontation, but about the aftermath. Once this information came out, there would be no going back. Family relationships would be permanently destroyed, legal consequences would likely follow, and Derek's entire sense of identity would be shattered. Are you sure you want to do this? James asked. I mean, I support you completely, but this is going to devastate everyone, not just your mother. James, they've been lying to Derek his entire life too. Yes, he's been complicit in treating me terribly, but he's also been a victim of their manipulation. And the money they've been stealing from relatives? That's not just about revenge, that's actual crime. People have a right to know they've been defrauded. Saturday morning, I met Uncle Richard, Aunt Patricia, and 2 other relatives at a restaurant near my parents' house. We went over the plan one final time, distributed the evidence folders, and drove to the house where I'd grown up. My mother answered the door, and her face went through a series of expressions when she saw me: surprise, anger, and then a calculating look that I now recognized as her trying to figure out how to spin the situation to her advantage. Maya, she said carefully, what a surprise. I thought you made it clear you never wanted to see us again. Hello, Helen, Uncle Richard said, stepping forward. We need to have a family meeting. All of us. Right now. I could see my mother's mind racing, trying to understand why Richard was so formal, why everyone looked so serious. But she stepped aside to let us in, probably calculating that she could handle whatever we'd come to discuss. The living room fell silent when we entered. Derek was there with Stephanie, my father was in his usual chair, and a few other relatives were scattered around the room. Derek looked at me with pure hatred, while my father just looked confused and uncomfortable. "Well," my mother said, trying to regain control, "I suppose Maya has some things she wants to get off her chest. Though I'm not sure why she needed to bring an army with her." "Actually, Helen," Richard said, "Maya isn't the one who needs to explain anything. You are." He handed her one of Maria's folders. "We need you to explain why you've been telling us Derek is struggling financially while he lives in luxury. We need you to explain why you told Patricia he needed medical funding for an accident that never happened. And we need you to explain why you've been lying about Derek's age and adoption status for over 20 years. The color drained from my mother's face. Derek looked confused, turning from the folder in Mom's hands to the similar folders being distributed to everyone in the room. "I don't know what Maya has told you," my mother began, but Richard cut her off. "Maya didn't tell us anything until we started asking questions. These documents speak for themselves, Helen. Bank records, adoption papers, birth certificates, everything you've been hiding for decades." Derek opened his folder and started reading. I watched his expression change from confusion to shock to what looked like growing horror. "What the hell is this?" he said, holding up a birth certificate. "This says I was born in November, not March. And it says I'm 6 months younger than Maya, not 3 years older." "Derek, honey, let me explain," my mother started, but Derek was already reading the adoption papers. "Adopted? I'm adopted? My mother died when I was 2. His voice was getting louder, more panicked. "Maya, what the fuck is this? What game are you playing?" "It's not a game, Derek," I said quietly. "It's the truth. You're not my older brother. You're my younger cousin who was adopted when your mother died. And Mom has been lying to both of us our entire lives." Derek turned to our parents, his face pale. "Is this true? Are you really not my biological parents?" My father, who had been silent through the entire confrontation, finally spoke. "Derek, son, we are your parents. We raised you, we love you." "That's not what he asked, Dad," I interrupted. "He asked if you're his biological parents. And the answer is no. His biological mother was Dad's sister, and she died in a car accident. You adopted Derek, but you never told him the truth." The room erupted in chaos. Derek was shouting questions, Stephanie was trying to calm him down, and various relatives were demanding explanations from my parents. But my mother, surprisingly, had gone completely silent, staring at the documents in her lap with an expression I'd never seen before. "There's more," Uncle Richard announced, and the room fell silent again. "Helen, we need you to explain where the $120,000 we've sent for Derek's care over the past 5 years has actually gone. Because it clearly hasn't been used for the purposes you described." Derek's head snapped up. $120,000? What $120,000? "The money we've been sending to help with your expenses, your education, your medical bills," Aunt Patricia said. "The money your mother said you desperately needed because you were struggling." Derek looked around the room wildly. "I never knew about any money. I thought Mom and Dad were paying for everything themselves." "You mean you thought we were paying for everything?" my father said quietly, and for the first time, I heard something like anger in his voice directed at Derek. "Your apartment, your car, your credit cards, I've been covering all of it because your mother said it was necessary. Because I told you the family was helping," my mother finally exploded. "Because Derek deserves support. He's been through trauma, losing his mother so young. Trauma he doesn't even remember because you never told him about it." I shouted back. "And meanwhile, your actual daughter worked 2 jobs through college and took out student loans because building character was apparently only important for me." The revelations kept coming as family members shared their pieces of the puzzle. Derek learned that he'd been receiving financial support from relatives who thought he was struggling. My father learned that my mother had been telling his family that he couldn't afford to support Derek alone. And everyone learned that I had been systematically excluded from family support while being blamed for being ungrateful. But the most devastating moment came when Derek found the intercepted mail documentation in his folder. "Maya," he said, his voice cracking, "Grandma tried to send you things? Birthday cards and Christmas presents. According to Eleanor, yes. I never received any of them." Derek turned to our mother with an expression of pure betrayal. "You stole Maya's mail? You kept her from having a relationship with Grandma." "I was protecting this family," my mother screamed. "Your grandmother was trying to poison Maya against us, trying to tell her lies that would have destroyed everything we built." "Lies." Derek laughed bitterly. "Mom, everything we built is the lie. My entire identity is a lie. My age, my relationship to this family, my financial situation, everything." The confrontation continued for hours. Derek demanded to know every detail of his adoption and his real family history. My father, finally understanding the extent of my mother's deception, began asking his own uncomfortable questions about finances and family relationships. And gradually, the truth emerged completely. My mother had orchestrated everything from the beginning. She'd lied about Derek's age to make the adoption seem more natural. She'd created a narrative of him being the heir to the family legacy to justify special treatment. She'd systematically isolated me from extended family members who might have questioned the disparity in treatment. And she'd been running financial cons on multiple relatives for years, using Derek as a sympathy case while ensuring he lived in luxury. When Derek finally understood the full scope of what had been done, both to him and to me, his reaction was explosive. "I can't even look at you right now," he told our mother. "Do you understand what you've done? You've made me complicit in abusing my own cousin. You've stolen money from our family. You've destroyed Maya's relationship with everyone, including Grandma." "Derek, honey, I did this for you." "No, you did this for yourself. You used me as a tool to manipulate everyone, including Dad. And you made me hate Maya when I should have been protecting her." Derek turned to me then, and for the first time in our lives, I saw genuine remorse in his eyes. "Maya, I don't know how to apologize for this. I don't even know where to start. I've been horrible to you, and I didn't even know why." "Derek, you were lied to just like I was," I said. "The difference is, your lies made your life easier, and mine made my life hell." The aftermath of that family meeting was swift and brutal. Within a week, Uncle Richard had contacted a lawyer about recovering the fraudulently obtained funds. Aunt Patricia filed a police report for the fake medical emergency money. And Maria, the forensic accountant, had handed over evidence of tax fraud and mail theft to the appropriate authorities. My mother tried to spin the situation initially, claiming she'd been trying to protect Derek from the trauma of knowing about his adoption. But when faced with evidence of years of financial fraud, document falsification, and mail theft, even she couldn't maintain the charade. She hired a lawyer and stopped communicating with the family entirely. My father, meanwhile, was dealing with the realization that his complicity had enabled decades of abuse against his biological daughter. The man who had always seemed weak and ineffective was forced to confront the consequences of his passivity. He reached out to me multiple times, trying to apologize, trying to explain, but the damage was too extensive for simple apologies. Derek's response surprised everyone, including me. Once he understood the full extent of what had happened, he became obsessed with making amends. He immediately moved out of the luxury apartment my father had co-signed for, sold the BMW, and got his own place that he could afford on his actual salary. He also started therapy to deal with the identity crisis of learning that his entire life had been built on lies. More importantly, Derek began reaching out to family members to apologize for his role in the deception, even though he hadn't known the truth. He also started paying back money to relatives who had been defrauded, using his savings and taking on extra work to make restitution. "I know I can't undo 23 years of treating you like garbage," he told me during one of our tentative reconciliation conversations. "But I want to try to build something real between us. Not as the fake older brother who is better than you, but as your younger cousin who owes you more than I can ever repay." The legal consequences for my mother were significant. She was charged with mail theft, fraud, and tax evasion. While she avoided jail time through a plea deal, she faced substantial fines, restitution payments, and probation. The financial impact was severe enough that my parents had to sell their house and significantly downsize their lifestyle. But the personal consequences were even more devastating. The elaborate social network my mother had built around her lies completely collapsed when the truth came out. Friends and extended family members who had been manipulated for years cut contact entirely. She went from being seen as a devoted mother managing a difficult family situation to being recognized as a calculating manipulator who had abused her own child while defrauding relatives. For me, the vindication was everything I'd hoped for and more. People who had dismissed me as ungrateful or bitter now understood that I'd been the victim of systematic abuse and manipulation. Family members who had been kept at distance by my mother's lies began reaching out, sharing their own suspicions and regrets about not intervening sooner. My relationship with Derek evolved slowly but genuinely. We started having regular coffee meetings where we would talk about our real experiences growing up, sharing memories and trying to understand how the lies had shaped both of our perspectives. Derek was horrified to learn about specific incidents where he'd been cruel to me, and I was surprised to discover that he'd had his own struggles with the pressure of being the golden child. I always felt like I was performing, he admitted during one conversation. Like if I stopped being perfect, if I stopped living up to their expectations, everything would fall apart. I had anxiety attacks about disappointing them, but I never understood why the stakes felt so high. Because your entire place in the family was conditional, I realized. Mom needed you to be the perfect heir to justify the lies she'd told. If you failed, her whole scheme would have been exposed. Derek nodded sadly. She used both of us, just in different ways. You were the scapegoat, and I was the golden goose. Neither of us got to just be ourselves. As months passed, Derek and I developed something I'd never expected, a genuine sibling-like relationship. Not the fake hierarchy my mother had created, but a real connection between two people who had survived the same dysfunctional family system. Derek became genuinely protective of me, and I found myself offering support when he struggled with therapy or legal proceedings. The extended family dynamics changed dramatically as well. With my mother's manipulative influence removed, I began developing real relationships with aunts, uncles, and cousins I'd barely known growing up. They shared stories about my grandmother that my mother had never told me, including details about college funds and inheritance money that had been set aside for me but mysteriously never materialized. Uncle Richard became particularly supportive, helping me understand family history and even offering to help with graduate school funding, support that apparently had always been available but had been blocked by my mother's interference. My career continued to flourish without the constant emotional drain of family drama. The promotion I'd received led to another one within 6 months, and I was invited to speak at marketing conferences about campaign strategies. James and I moved in together, and for the first time in my life, I was in a relationship with someone who had never known the diminished version of myself that had existed in my family home. But perhaps the most satisfying aspect of the entire situation was watching the natural consequences play out. My mother, who had spent decades carefully crafting her image and manipulating family relationships, was now completely isolated. Her schemes had been exposed, her reputation was destroyed, and she was facing the financial and legal consequences of her choices. Derek, meanwhile, was building genuine relationships for the first time in his life. Without the artificial elevation my mother had provided, he had to develop real skills, real integrity, and real connections. The process was difficult, but it was also authentic in a way his previous life had never been. My father struggled the most with the aftermath. He had to confront the fact that his passivity and willingness to let my mother control family dynamics had enabled years of abuse against his own daughter. Some relationships could be rebuilt, but the damage was extensive, and trust would take years to restore. As for me, I discovered something my mother had never wanted me to know. I was strong enough to build a life entirely on my own merit. The independence she'd tried to prevent me from achieving had become my greatest strength. I didn't need their approval, their financial support, or their version of love. I had built something real and sustainable without them. Looking back on that night when my mother screamed for me to get out and never come back, I realized it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Her attempt to punish me for speaking the truth had freed me to discover the truth. Her effort to isolate me had led me to people who actually cared about my well-being. Her manipulation had ultimately destroyed her own life while setting me free to build the life I was meant to have. The final irony wasn't lost on me. In trying to secure her own position by sacrificing her daughter, my mother had ensured her own downfall. The karma she'd accumulated through decades of lies and manipulation had come full circle, and the justice served was more complete than anything I could have planned myself. So here's my question for all of you watching. Have you ever discovered that the people you trusted most were the ones betraying you behind your scenes? How did you handle learning that your entire family dynamic was built on lies? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Sometimes sharing these experiences helps us all heal from family trauma. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life drama stories. Share this video with anyone who might need to hear that it's possible to survive family betrayal and come out stronger on the other side. Thank you for listening to my story and for all the support you've shown. I hope my experience reminds you that sometimes walking away from toxic family situations isn't giving up. It's giving yourself the chance to discover who you really are when you're not being manipulated or diminished by people who claim to love you. Family should lift you up, not tear you down, and you deserve relationships built on honesty, respect, and genuine care. Take care of yourselves, and remember, the truth always finds a way to surface, and justice has a way of coming for those who hurt innocent people. Until next time.